Okay, something a little different. This is not a how-to channel, and you're going to probably see why in a second. But I figured it would be kind of interesting to show you around a little bit of what's involved with winterizing our RV for the upcoming freezing season. Okay, so this is our RV. It's a 2000 Forest River Wildwood, and it is dead easy when it comes to winterizing, which is why I feel confident I can show you how it's done. So I'm going to kind of start by showing you what I've done here off camera. The first thing I did was open up these two low point drains. One is for the hot system, one is for the cold system. You can tell they're currently open because the handles are lined up parallel with the hoses. And since the water has had time to drain out of these, I'm going to now turn these so they are closed. Second thing I did was the water heater. And all that involved was removing this anode rod and opening up the drain hole to the tank. Now that rod looks like it's in bad shape, but that is actually really good condition. It's when they're really eaten away that they need to be replaced. So even though it looks horrible, that one is still plenty good for another season. And I'll just leave that in there so that I can find it in the spring. And that stays open for the winter. Okay, next step is going to involve going inside and doing some work there. Now our trailer is equipped with a whole system water filter. Funny thing is I never put a water filter in it just because we don't drink this water anyway, but it becomes a bit of a pain for winterizing purposes. Now our filter is located here under the bathroom sink. And you can see there it's just a twist-on canister. Now I say this is a pain for me, and I'll tell you why. And that's because you can buy bypassing plates that sit inside this filter, and that's supposed to block off this canister so that you can just so you don't have to run antifreeze through the whole canister and fill it up. I have tried each of the last 2 winters and have not successfully managed to get that bypass plate to make a tight seal. And every time I start winterizing and running antifreeze through the system, this filter leaks and makes a heck of a mess. So I've decided this year I'm not going to run the bypassing plate. I'm just going to bite the bullet and fill this canister with water and pay, an extra couple dollars worth of antifreeze to just avoid that headache and the mess that always comes with it. Your mileage will certainly vary. I mean, we sell a lot of those bypass plates and they seem to work fine for other people, so it's probably something I'm doing. So this just nicely unscrews, and it is full of water, so I have to be very careful while taking it out. And of course I'm not just going to dump it down the sink, because the goal here is to get water out of the system. So I'm just going to carefully cart it out and do a little watering of the lawn with it. So with the water now out of that canister, I just simply have to reattach it, make sure it's firmly seated there so that it doesn't leak when I start running antifreeze. And there, that's good and finger tight. That's a solid seal. That's not going to leak this year. Now, I have one more thing I want to do inside before we get through to the actual antifreeze de-winterizing part of things, and that's to deal with the inside of the water heater. So in our unit, to access the water heater from the inside and where the water heater bypass is I have to remove these drawers and get access that way. So of course these just slide out. And this bottom drawer actually never really latches all that well anyway, because it keeps hitting the furnace hose that or the furnace ducting that runs behind here. So it's the joys of a 20-year-old RV. Things get a little wacky over time. So this is my water heater bypass. So the way it normally operates, cold water flows into the bottom here through this hose or through this pipe. It gets heated and then it flows out through the top. Now, since I don't want to fill the entire water heater with antifreeze, what I'm doing is I'm shutting this valve off at the bottom, which will prevent antifreeze, from going into the tank. And I think that valve just broke. And shut this one off. If you can see where my hand is here, turn this one off to turn off or prevent water from back flushing into it, and then open this valve. This is the actual bypass, and that's going to allow antifreeze to come in here and flow up and out into the hot system without going into the tank. Now I have to see what happened with that valve that snapped at the bottom there. Now I do apologize, this is probably really hard to see, but all that happened is this handle popped off. So I was able to put it back on, and you can see because it is perpendicular to the piping, I know this valve is closed and that water heater is not going to fill up with antifreeze. Now the next step I'm going to do, I have seen cause religious wars on different RV forums over the years, and that is I'm going to blow out the lines with compressed air. So why does this cause basically wars to break out online? And that's because there's two camps that really like to argue their point in forums and in Facebook groups, and that is all you need to do is blow out your lines with compressed air and not bother with antifreeze. And the group that's the exact opposite and says, well, if I'm using antifreeze, what do I need to blow out my lines for? And I'm going to give you my take on that argument. I play it safe and do both. And the two reasons for that is, number one, here in Canada, I absolutely do not trust simply blowing out the lines with compressed air to be sufficient. And I know I can get all sorts of comments on this one from people that'll be like, I've been RVing 30 years and I ain't never done nothing with antifreeze. All I do is blow out the lines and it's fine. Never had a problem. And my counter argument to that is it's not a problem until it becomes a problem. And every year I see people who have had freezing issues with their RV. And it is expensive, and it is time-consuming, and it is absolutely not worth it to try and save a few dollars worth of antifreeze. So I do it both ways because I like to make sure the antifreeze I'm running through the system is not diluted at all. I want it to be as pure as possible. And so I blow the lines out first, then run the antifreeze. It's safe, it's simple, it takes no time at all. Now, if you don't have an air compressor at home, maybe it's not worth your effort and you can skip this step, but I absolutely, based on 20 plus years of RVing and 5 years in the RV business, would absolutely not rely on just blowing out my lines. I don't care how many times you've done it without a problem. So into the absolute disaster of a garage that is the DroneOCan workshop, such as it is. I'm just going to get Before I fire up the air compressor though, I'll show you my toolkit here if I can find it. And this is a good winterizing tip. Have your stuff ready so you're not hunting for it when you getting ready to do the job. So while hunting for my blowout plug, I did find one of these bypassing plates that I was talking about with the water filter there, and you can see it's basically just a rubber disc and a metal plate, and this is just supposed to sit on top of that water filter when you screw the filter in place to prevent antifreeze from flowing into the canister. Like I said, there's nothing to it, but I've never been able to make it work successfully. I know it's something I'm doing wrong, but it's just not worth it for me to bother with it again. It's funny, in digging through my RV cupboard, I actually found 2 bypassing plates, because the first year I bought one, I assumed it was a defective plate, so I purchased a second one. It didn't work for me either, so that's how I know it's something I'm doing wrong, because there's nothing mechanical that can go wrong with this, so if they don't work, it's clearly user error. I didn't find it in the garage. Go to the RV toolbox, oh, yep, there it is. So I call it my blowout plug, but it's not really a blowout plug. You can buy cheap plastic ones of these, which work just fine if you have 2 people to do the job, because they typically involve you having to hold the hose onto the plug while you blow it out. This contraption here costs a little bit more money, but it just plugs straight into my air compressor, and then I don't have to have someone holding the hose on. I can just do it with one person. So that's what I'm going to be using for this job, and that's why. And now, before I turn this on and start making a whole bunch of noise, the other thing to keep in mind is you don't want to run too much air pressure. I usually keep it about 20 psi is all, because you just need to move air to blow out the water. There's no need to run the risk of blowing out your lines. So with that, let's annoy the neighbors. So hopefully you can hear me over the sound of the air compressor in the garage, but I'm just going to screw this in place on my city water inlet, and I'll get that done while the compressor builds up pressure. So you can see how that just mounts right on to my freshwater city connection, and I'll go get the air hose and we're ready to proceed. So with that, my water system is now actually pressured up with air. And like I said, I set the compressor down to about 20 psi output, so not a ton of pressure, but enough that I can at least force the water out of the taps and fixtures and get this unit ready for antifreeze. All that's involved now is systemically going from faucet to faucet and fixture to fixture, and make sure I turn it on and just let that air pressure force the water out. And you can see I am doing this completely with just air pressure. The water pump is actually turned off. So all that water that's coming out is a result of the air. I've given the air compressor a couple seconds here to catch up again, let the system repressurize, and I'm going to try this hot tap on the kitchen sink again, and we'll probably still get quite a bit of spray coming out. Oh, surprisingly not too much there. So now, having done the hot side, I'm now going to switch to the cold. And you can see there we got a good blast again of the cold side. Most of the air in the pipes coming to this faucet are pretty much free of water now. Now, as I said, this is an older and a very simple trailer, so there really isn't a lot to winterizing it. Obviously, if you have a newer unit with fancy water bypasses or selection knobs for changing between city water and your fresh tank, that's going to be a little more different. I don't have an outside shower to worry about. I don't have an ice maker in the fridge to worry about. I don't have a washing machine that I need to worry about. So this unit is dead simple, and winterizing really does not take that long. In fact, if I wasn't taking the time to make this video, I'd probably be done by now. On to the next set of taps. Just let that run until there's no more water coming out. I'm going to let the system repressurize for a couple seconds here, and then to the next tap. Nothing to it. Moving on into the bathroom, I'm going to start with the tap down here. Let that run. Okay, that's just slowed to a drip. Let it pressure up again here, and I'm going to run the other side. Quite a bit coming out of there yet. And then pull it and do the shower head. Make sure that's open. And really, there's only one line running from the shower head from the tub diverter, so I don't know if it actually makes a difference, but I run both the hot and the cold for a second, but you can see the bulk of the water is still coming out of there. Now, if all I was doing was running the air through the lines, which, like I said, I don't recommend, but if that's all I was doing, I wouldn't be, or I would be more concerned about getting every last drop out as possible. But as it is, I'm really just doing this to prevent the antifreeze from being diluted. So if there's a few drops still coming out of the faucet when I shut the tap off, I'm not really that worried. And of course, everybody's least favorite part of RVing, the toilet. I'm just going to let that run again till I hear some air mostly coming through the lines, no more water. And I'm keeping the lid down only because nobody wants to see inside my toilet bowl. And then I just like to give it a quick blast of each one, just to make sure things are as empty as I think they are. Come back over here to the kitchen. And again, you get a little extra blast just as water changes, but that's that. My system is pretty much drained and clear of water now. So a couple things that could have gone wrong during this stage. Well, actually more than a couple, but first thing is, of course, like I said, dial down the pressure on your air compressor. You don't need to blast it at a high PSI rating and run the risk of blowing out fittings or connections. Make sure, again, the water heater, the tank has been bypassed. If I didn't have the bypass set correctly with that anode rod out of the tank, air would just be flowing through the outside of the tank there, and it would never pressure up the system to push water out. Same applies to the low point drains. If I hadn't remembered to close those low point drains before starting this process, all the air would just keep flowing out of those and would never pressurize the system. Another winter storage tip, you want to keep your fridge doors open or cracked open so that there's air circulation. That'll avoid a lot of mold buildup. I'm using these airing cards. This is a Dometic fridge. These are Dometic airing cards, and basically you can see what they do is they clip on there, and to the handle of the fridge, like so. So that way, during travel, they're supposed to keep your doors secured. One of the two held on my trip home from storage here. The freezer door was open when I walked into the trailer and I whacked my head on it. Okay. Oh, that freaking hurt. Freezer door was open. So I usually keep the doors completely secure during travel, but for winterizing I'll use those airing cards there just to make sure there's air circulation inside the fridge. A couple quick words about RV antifreeze. Not all RV antifreeze is created equal. Now, yes, all of it's going to prevent your unit from freezing up, which is its primary goal, but there's two different types and you'll see a price difference between the two. This is a more expensive version. This is propylene glycol based. This stuff is completely safe. You can drink this stuff if you really wanted to and it won't hurt you. I wouldn't recommend it. No, I'm not going to do it, but it's rated to -50. This is the better stuff. If you see antifreeze and it's a lot cheaper than other stuff you've seen, the odds are it's probably an alcohol base. Now there's two downsides to the alcohol/ethanol based RV antifreezes. The primary one is that they are flammable, and you will see a flammable logo on the containers of ethanol based antifreezes, or even the antifreezes that are ethanol and propylene glycol mixtures. I don't like putting anything more flammable than necessary in my RV. I figure I'm already running around with 60 pounds of propane and whatnot. I don't need to add anything more to it. Plus, those RV antifreezes tend to leave a bad taste or odor in the water system. Not necessarily a big deal if you're like us. I don't usually drink from the fresh tank anyway. It's really just for showers, toilets, and brushing of teeth. But if you can avoid it, why not? The other thing is those alcohol-based antifreezes tend to dry out the plumbing seals in the system. So this stuff doesn't have to be this brand. I'm not sponsored by anybody here. So, but being a propylene glycol-based, doesn't have those problems. This is non-flammable. This doesn't dry out the seals, and it won't leave a taste in the system. This is what I use. It's yes, it costs a little bit more per jug than the alcohol-based stuff, but if you've already spent thousands of dollars on an RV, spending a couple extra bucks once a year to get good RV antifreeze is worth it. So don't cheap out. And speaking of mistakes one can make with RV antifreeze, mine was assuming that I had enough left over from last year to winterize this year. Turns out that little bit of a jug is all I have left, so I don't actually have the antifreeze to do it today. So I'm going to have to finish this video off tomorrow. I will just do a quick little time jump here. I'm not going to do a part 2. But I will get the RV antifreeze tomorrow and finish off here. So let's jump ahead in time. All right, we have jumped forward in time. You can tell because I'm wearing different clothes. At least I hope I'm wearing different clothes. Anyway, I have my propylene glycol based antifreeze. I got 2 jugs here, which should be more than enough to do a trailer of this size. And the only other thing I need to have handy, and this is the only tool I really use for winterizing, and it's just a tube here with this spin fitting on it and a length of hose. Let's finish this job off. I brought a couple of flashlights in to try and make this a little easier to see for you, but there is my main water pump, and all I need to do is find the inlet side of the water pump. This is my hose that comes from my fresh tank fill on the outside of the trailer and comes right through here down into the floor, into the fresh tank. And this is the hose that runs from my fresh tank up to the water pump and in this side of the water pump. So this is the side, the suction side of the water pump, and that's what I'm going to want to disconnect. And I just have to twist this fitting and pull that hose out of the way. And now I take my other hose that I showed you there a second ago, and I'm just going to attach that onto the inlet side of the water pump. Let's try it with this hand. And sometimes these pumps aren't in the most accessible position, but that's okay. You only have to do this once a year usually, so it's just in that crowded spot there. It can be a little difficult to get it started without cross-threading. I think it's going this time. That feels cross-threaded yet. Hang on. The pump is actually even secured to the floor of the trailer. It should be able to vibration and things, but it doesn't really sit in there. So I got a little flexibility here to bring it closer. And I think that should be about on. I am got to make sure it's finger tight, but I also want to make sure it's on tight enough that there's no air leaks, because if it leaks then it won't prime itself. I think that's good there. So if I've done everything right up to this point now, there should be no leaks at that fresh water filter. There should be no leaks at the pump here. I can just go ahead, put the other end of my hose into my jug of antifreeze, turn on the water pump, and it should start sucking the jug dry. Okay, moment of truth. I'm just gonna punch this in, get it good and deep into the jug. I really should, there it is. I really should get a longer hose for doing this so that it's easier. But, you know, I'm lazy and cheap, so I keep using the same one every year. Okay, moment of truth. Here we go. And I hear it sucking it up. I see no visible leaks. Now I may have to turn the jug onto its side here a little bit to keep the hose down. And right now you can hear it's pressurizing the system. Okay, you'll probably notice a change in the video and the audio quality. My normal camera ran out of battery. So anyway, the water system has now pressurized up. I've been waiting and listening. The pump hasn't kicked in and I don't hear any leaks. So that's always important. At this point, you want to make sure you have no leaks, and I don't. So I'm ready to move on. So I have replaced the jug that the pump sucked up while filling the system with a brand new jug, and you can see everything is there and pressurized. The water pump is still engaged. So now if I come over to a tap, I'm going to turn the tap on. We'll hear the pump kick in and we'll see the pink start to flow out of the faucet here. And there we go. Once it's got a good stream of pink, like so, I can shut that one off, run the other side. Again, good stream of pink. Those water lines are now full of antifreeze. So all that's left is come over, do the bathroom sink here. Pink. You can hear the air coming out of that one. Pink. And you can see how little of that bottle this is actually using now. Into the bathroom, I'm going to start up high this time. So I'm going to turn on the diverter. So the water's going to come, or the antifreeze is going to come out of the shower head. Turn that on. There we go. Pink. And over to the other tap. Good spray of pink. And I'm not going to bother cleaning that up. That can stay in the tub through the winter. Do the same with the toilet. Give it a good shot. And just like that, I'm pretty much done with the winterizing of the trailer. I've got the toilet done, the shower done, the lavatory sink done, the galley sink done. I mean, that's it. Now it's just a matter of taking everything out of the unit and putting it away. Actually, I lied. Before I do that, there's one more thing I like to do just to play it safe. Undoubtedly, when you're done, you'll end up with a jug or two with a little bit of antifreeze left. And I just like to take that and pour a good amount down the sinks so that if there is any water left in the traps, it gets replaced with antifreeze. And of course, given that there's the two drains over here, I want to make sure I hit both of them with a good shot of antifreeze. And I'm going to do one more good shot just down the bathtub to make sure it's good and winterized. So as you can see, I've got two partial jugs left. I'm going to combine those into one jug before I put them away for the year and throw them back in the garage. And I mean, that's pretty much it. The antifreeze will keep, so I have almost a full jug for next year, which, if not for my issues with that fresh water filter, would be enough to probably do this entire trailer. As I mentioned before, don't forget, if you have things like an outside shower or a washing machine, anything like that, you need to make sure you're winterizing those properly. The other thing is I'm going to bring the batteries inside for the winter. I keep them in the garage and keep them on a battery maintainer just to keep them healthy. I don't leave them in the trailer over the winter just because of the risk of freezing. And yes, I know a fully charged battery should not freeze, and I could just make sure they're fully topped up and disconnected. I don't want to leave them connected because there's always a parasitic draw in an RV, and if the battery is connected, it will run down over time. Now, I know you're going to say, wait, I have a solar package. That will work, and that's true to a certain extent. You have to keep in mind your solar panel is going to get covered in snow and ice over the course of the winter. The days are going to be shorter, so you still run a risk, even with solar, keeping your batteries connected through the year in storage. So I don't like to do it. I'm leaving it in for today because we still have to haul the trailer back to the storage lot. The town only lets us keep it on the driveway up to a certain date, and then it has to be moved. So I'm going to leave the battery on. You have to have a battery in your RV if you are going to tow it legally, because in the event of a breakaway, it's your RV battery that activates the brakes and will bring the trailer to a stop. So battery's going to stay in. I'll take it to storage, pull the battery out, bring it back home. But that's going to do it. That's the end of our 2021 camping season. We only got out 9 nights in the trailer this year, which is a record low for us. It's just a combination of work schedule and other things on the go. It just didn't happen for us this year, but that's okay. We had a great time in the time we were out. So I appreciate you watching. Thank you very much for tuning in here to kind of a different video. It's not really an exploration thing. It's not really a history thing, but just kind of a glimpse into the life of DroneOCan. I will see you in the next one. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention, of course, I'm going to pull my fill line off the water pump and reattach it to the fresh tank inlet hose. So don't forget to do that. You want to make sure you're ready to go for next year. Okay, try and do this without knocking the camera over. But I just thread this length of hose on. I'll try it with my other. And that's what I was trying to avoid doing.